Hey everybody, thanks for pulling up the channel. We finally got around to doing another artifact ID, and I want to give a shout out to my friends in Baja, Mexico. Coyotes, coyotetitos. Wow! That Pepe found recently, you guys, if you haven't ever checked in on their channel, a coyote arrowhead. Just type that in, it'll come up. And they found a hair hay recently. Really big one. Pretty nice one. And I never would have dreamed that they would have went that far south of the Baja Peninsula. But yeah, check those guys out. They do a good job. And you'll enjoy it. It's really good to watch their channel. Thank you guys for sharing that, by the way, because you could have kept it secret and never shown anyone, but you chose to put it on YouTube. So that's how we got hooked up. That's what's so neat about YouTube. So starting off here, we're going to do a video today on Duncan and Hanna points. I've got my literature laid out here ready to go. And I've got some examples here that we'll look at it here toward the end of the video and get familiarized with those. And hopefully this will help you guys out. And I'm actually doing this. I promised Garrett I would do this, and we met him at the show in Tulsa, at Donnie Rep Local show at ORU campus, and a really good show. Had a lot of fun, met a lot of good people. We didn't have time to talk to everyone because we were on the microscope for 5 hours straight. Barely even got time to do a lunch. But that's a good thing because we had a lot of neat artifacts. Got to authenticate the Shaman's pipe, which if y'all watch me and my shadow, Aaron's channel, he featured that on there. I wished I took pictures of the birdstone. We got to do a birdstone for a guy. It was really neat. He bought it at a jewelry store for $25. And he said, "What's it worth?" And I said, "Well, it's worth about between, $300 to $400 easily." So you found a gem in that if you found it at a jewelry store. And so got to look at a gorget that was made out of glacial shell that was really neat. I'd never seen one like it, but we put it under the microscope, and everything it told us it was authentic. So he was real happy. And we did shoot down a few pieces that were not authentic. And that's what I like about that microscope. It don't lie. But at any rate, right now we're going to look over some new DNA technology. Some of this DNA now is unreliable. So the genome testing is what's really breaking the surface of the old guard on how old some of this civilizations and some of these relics and artifacts are. So here's a good example of it. So this is on Smart News Magazine. This is on the Smithsonian channel. You can pull that up if you want, and you can read it yourself. I'm not going to get into the in-depth on this. I'm just hitting the high spots on it. So it's called porous DNA technology. They submerge the entire object in sodium phosphate solution, then slowly heat the liquid to around 194 degrees, and they don't go any higher than that. This is non-destructive, okay? So the liquid, when they heat it, it releases this DNA. It's stored deep inside the object. It emerges, and of course it states what I just said. It leaves the artifact undamaged. Now this was an elk tooth that a woman had that she was buried with. It was a funerary good. Now this is in Russia. And the area here where it was found was Denisova Cave, which is on the shoreline of Lake Baikal. By the way, Lake Baikal in Russia is the largest freshwater lake, natural lake, not man-made. It has no dam on it, it has no inflow. It's just like this huge pool. It's the largest freshwater lake in the world. Why wouldn't you live by that? So we're getting a better understanding through this technology. So it was an elk tooth necklace. So they did this test, and it says, but however, it didn't work on artifacts contaminated by DNA that are handled by today's archaeologists. So in other words, your sweat off of your fingers will contaminate it. But the artifact that they did do the test on, the elk tooth, was authentic, and they did get a solid date on it. And it says it also fails in certain soil types and geography and typologies. And the tooth was an elk tooth that the woman owned the artifact pendant. It was made into a pendant. And like I said, it was in the Denisova Cave region in Lake Baikal. And so that's really neat. And some of this genome testing is really blowing things wide open. And like I said, if you want to pull that documentary up, you can read it for yourself and get all the details. But Garrett, what we're doing this Hanna Duncan typology over today and identification, he sent me a lot of pictures of, he's got a lot of these points. And he said, man, it looks like a Dalton, late phase Dalton, but it's not. And the first thing popped in my head, so if you can scope in right here, was McKean. And now McKean looks paleo, doesn't it? It looks late paleo. It really does. And there's some fluting, some basal thinning that would tip you off that this could be. So let's look at it. Let's it's okay. You can get back off from it now. I'm just going to read off here a little bit. First thing let's do, let's go to the age. Now this type site, this McKean type site, was in Wyoming. And it was named and described by Richard Page Wheeler. And there's also a Wheeler point, but it has, to my knowledge, nothing to do with McKean. But we'll get into that later here as we go through this. And this is 1952 by the Kehoe Reservoir in northeastern Wyoming. Now let's go down. We don't need the old description on it. Let's see what the age is, and then we'll compare this to Duncan and Hanna as we go through that, and then we'll get a comparison. So the antiquity date suggests 3,500 to 4,000 years ago for the McKean point. Okay, so we got that pretty well took care of on that. And that's the first thing popped in my mind when Garrett sent me the pictures. And he was at the show, by the way, and he's got a heck of a collection. Him and his dad's hunted with him as well. But man, I said, well, let me think about it a little bit and I'll get back with you. So the first thing popped in my mind was McKean. So I sent him a message back and I said, look, Garrett, I think what you got here is Duncan. So look at these bases in the basal treatment and the blade treatment. This looks a lot like a McKean. And this one as well, the basal regions on them. So does that one, this example F, I, G, and H even. D has this example D has a deep indentation. But you can see on these examples that this is one that hasn't been really exhausted, and this came out of Colorado. So let's go in here and let's look and see what it says on this Duncan. And this was described by Wheeler for a type found in Wyoming as well. Okay, so let's go to the date, and I'm probably going to catch some flack over all this underlining and scribbling I've done on this page, but it's noteworthy why I did it. But at any rate, let me get into some of this. And it says the Duncan points are found in the Canadian provinces of Saskatchewan, Alberta, and in the United States of Montana, Dakotas, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. Okay. And parts of Missouri, northwest Arkansas. So it's got a wide range. And so if we go down to remarks here, and this I believe this is Perino that's pointing this out. And by the way, there's three different archaeologists that have covered McKean, Duncan, and Hanna, so we've got a pretty good repository of information on this. It's not like it's just a one-page shot and that's it. Okay, which that's good, you know. And what really intrigues me is no one really collects these and puts a lot of emphasis on this point. It doesn't get much publicity, we'll say. And that's okay, but maybe this will help get some of this broke loose. Okay, so Duncan points range from 2500 BC to 850 BC. In northeastern Oklahoma, the type is found in a middle to late Archaic context, so it's a pretty old point. Okay, but here's what's crazy. Perino, he weighed these points in gram weights. And I got a question here, weight in the air? I'm like, none of this is in any of these other literature. I'm like, wow, this is pretty strange. I mean, why would you do that? Well, I guess he had a reason to do it. I guess he was trying to get a more, you know, overall average comparison of them. It'd be my guess. I never asked Greg about it, and I don't know about anybody else that, you know, really elaborated on it either. Like I said, this point type has never had a lot of notoriety. It's not highly collectible. They're in every collection you see in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, Missouri, I'm sure. But they just don't get any publicity, and that's fine. I mean, and it gives the description here, and there's a big description paragraph I'm not going to go into, but it gives a general indentations, you know, the basal treatment and all that. Okay, so here we go. Let's go down here to remarks, and this is where it gets a little deep, but that's okay too. It says, the known distribution of Duncan and Hanna points shows that while Duncan and Hanna points have been found with McKean points in 4 sites, they have been found together with McKean points absent. Okay, and then here, only once. And they have occurred separately in 9 sites. And that whereas Duncan points have been found with McKean points at 4 sites, where Hanna points were lacking. So you see there's kind of this here and there, we'll say. You know, they're in this sites, there's these regions, but they're not together. They're not present together. So that kind of tells us that, you know, these type sites differentiated the 3 types. But they all came down from Wyoming, down the Arkansas River drainage, and here's what Greg says. Greg says, where they were lacking, and that's where I left off, Hanna points have not been found with McKean, where Duncan points were lacking. Now here you go again. Now here's the key to it. These observations suggest that all 3 points are substantive types, meaning there's a lot of them. They're substantive because there's substance on these sites where these were found, and a lot of them, through this range from Wyoming all the way down from where? Okay, hang on, we're going to get there. Substantive types and imply some degree of temporal differences among them. What does temporal mean? Well, I looked it up in my Riverside University dictionary. Temporal simply means over a long period of time. So that explains these dates that stretch out. Now here's where the key to it for our area. Penetration of the type into northeast Oklahoma may have been southeastward down the Arkansas River from Wyoming. Wow. So man, that point made a lot of rounds. Okay, let's flip in here, and I've got it marked. So let's go to our Hanna. Let's go to our Hanna. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details on the dating and the type site and all that. I will, however, tell you who did it. Now, see the comparisons in the waist area. Now, look at the waist area. That looks a lot like a McKean. This one doesn't, however. This one really doesn't either. But this one kind of looks, you know, somewhat. It doesn't have the concavity, in other words. So the Hanna was later. So let's see who named them on the type site. So it was described by Wheeler, 1954, for a type found in Wyoming. Wow. So here we go again. We're going back to the origin of where they came from. So here's something we need to really look at too. And this would be your preform. And here's your Duncan knife. It says, look here, guess what? Here it comes again. A large knife that is a part of the McKean point complex. Well, that kind of reminds you of Agate Basin. That was a complex, Cody complex. See where I'm going with this? So, and without doing a thorough examination and a study of the literature, you can't arrive at a very accurate timeline and distribution. So let's see what we got in the comments right here. We already know the age and the culture and all that. And now Greg does say age and culture. Now this book right here, by the way, is one we got at the show. This is Selected Points, Preforms, and Knives of the North American Indians, Volume 3. And Greg wanted to do this evolution of the preform, which would be this. Here's your block of flint, and it, look how it transforms as it's resharpened. So it ends up in either broken or a drill form. And then when it's exhausted, they're done with it. So they got a lot of use out of points. And that's what we got to keep in mind, guys. When altered by resharpenings, things look a lot different. Everyone would like to have a classic example of points, but that'd be nice, wouldn't it? But we get broken and resharpened and all that. But here we go. So Greg says this is a late archaic blade dating in 2000 BC range. Most of the dart points had been used both as dart points and knives, eliminating the necessity for having many of the larger blades. Yeah, reduction. As they reduce it and sharpen it, then you end up with these small points. So let's see what Greg says about this Duncan knife. The point is part of the McKean complex and includes in this order. So this is real important too. You're going to be kind of amazed at what he says here. The Duncan point, the McKean point, Duncan point, and the Hanna are of the Mallory point, and the Yankee point. Now I didn't put them in here because those two aren't inclusive, to our area. He says Plains chronology limits the Middle Archaic period to between 4000 BC and 500 BC, eliminating the early woodland period in the East and Midwest, in which pottery is the determining factor for a more sedentary society in those areas. In other words, hunter-gatherers mainly settled down and grew food, corn, pumpkins, the like. So, in other words, before that period, these people traveled. They migrated. They used the river as a travel way. And why not? Why wouldn't you? If you're living that lifestyle, yeah, that's probably a real good analogy. And I like that Plains chronology. It says limits the Middle Archaic period. So yeah. So I hope this helped, and I'm not going to use Garrett's full name because I don't want anybody trolling him and trying to follow him to his hunting sites and all this. This stuff's happened. So let's look at these little examples right here that I have in my collection. And you can see the basal treatment on these look a lot like the only one I'm skeptical of. This could be a Frio type, but what's weird too on this one, if you look here, guys, on this tip, that thing was fractured and they went in there and beveled that right there. I don't know if I can get the lighting right. I should have brought my little flashlight, but at any rate, they beveled that thing, and who knows why. This one if you look at this blade, see how it's twisted? So it's got a little bit of beveling that occurred on this face. And it's a neat little point. This side, not much to look at, but look where they thinned it right there. You got two thinning flakes that come off that base. And this one, when I found it, I had 2 or 3 collectors look at it and try to help me out, and they said, man, I don't know what that thing is. But again, back then we didn't have a lot of interest in these type points. This one's actually a pretty nice little point. The material it's made out of, this is probably Boone shirt. This is K County raw, so that tells me that's an old point that wasn't heat treated. And this is probably an upper Boone, you know, that turns white in areas in the Boone formation. This right here, I'm almost positive this material is probably 4 acre, a better grade of 4 acre. This could be, right here, this little point could be made out of a newly named chert that comes out around Sardis Lake area down there. I forgot it, the name escapes me right now because I'm not familiar with it. But at any rate, that's probably what these points are, with the exception of this one. But hope you guys enjoyed this. And since he's showing our potato crop, we put it in it, we thought a little bit late, but everything's doing great. These white spots is lime I put on to try to adjust the pH in the soil, but looks like we may eat it a little better this year, this fall anyhow. But I enjoyed doing these videos, guys, and if you've got any suggestions, put them in the comments. If you've got a point type that you're skeptical about, I'll do some research and we'll see if we can figure out what it is. But again, thanks for tuning in. Give the thumbs up. That helps keep it in the algo rhythm thing that YouTube does. And comment. Be happy to hear from you. So thanks a lot, and catch us on the next one.